Hey friends, welcome to the Canyon Pathways podcast, where we invite you to live like a son and lead like a father. Canyon Pathways is a global community of men on the journey from the striving of servanthood to the freedom of sonship as we traverse the canyon that is midlife leadership. My name is Noel Boucher, and I'm the founder and part of the leadership team for this venture, and I'll be your guide throughout this podcast as we explore and discover what it means to live like a son so we can lead like a compassionate father. Welcome to this episode of the podcast. Glad to be with you as always, and thrilled about not only what's going on here with this episode of the pod, but the next one, and generally the CP pod, what it's been able to do around the world, bringing men to the table of sonship, and more generally, what Canyon Pathways is doing as this community continues to grow around the world. We're seeing lives changed. We're seeing transformation happen in hearts and minds. The freedom of sonship start to emerge as we move from the striving of servanthood, and that affects not just us, but our families and our colleagues and our ventures and our congregations. And so we're seeing fruit everywhere, and it's thrilling. We've got two types of episodes here where we celebrate that fruit and dig into it and give thanks to the Father for what he's doing in and through us as he gives to us this spirit of sonship through his Holy Spirit, made possible by the life, death, and resurrection of the Son, the first of many brothers. We're excited about how the pod is capturing this and really becoming not just a table, really a campfire where we can come globally around the space, come back to it if we've been to a CP retreat or have walked through spiritual direction or have otherwise connected with Canyon Pathways guys, or if we're coming to this table, if we're sitting around this fire for the first time by discovering the podcast. Either way, we're warmed, we're given light and heat through this fellowship, and it's exciting. The two types of episodes we got are types like this one, which we call our field note episodes, where we look at one of our field notes, which is a short essay taking a look at a word that we believe embodies a concept that is central to this journey into sonship, living like a son, leading like a father. And then the second type of episode is our conversation episodes, where we invite to the table, to the microphone, one of our brothers in the Canyon Pathways community from around the world to not only share their story, but to go deeper into the particular word and concept and area that we're being invited into, get their wisdom on it and their deeper insights. And that's how we roll at the CP. In the CP community is living as sons among other sons, where we're not teaching, not fixing, but we're learning from one another and seeing the Father reveal more of who we are through other sons that we assemble around. So next episode is going to be one of those conversation episodes with Sherman Bradley and Jackie Jackson, incredible leaders, pastors, guides, and they're going to bring wisdom to this. And also we get to hear Jackie's story, which is exciting and going to be a huge blessing to us. But this first is our field note episode, and we're looking at surrender. The topic of this field note essay that we're going to jump into here in a second is surrender. You know, one of those topics that's interesting. It's for a lot of us maybe a tension point in our lives, because on the one hand, we are told to persevere and to keep walking, and that we are more than conquerors, and we overcome. And even when we're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, we fear no evil. We keep walking one foot, one step in front of the other, because we know this God who is creator, redeemer, and father to us is with us. We know that this Son, this Jesus who came, is with us, never leaving us nor forsake us. So we can persevere. We can keep going. And that's true. And at the same time, we're called to surrender. You know, I mean, how can it be that we're supposed to persevere on the one hand, and then one of the most famous hymns of all time is, I surrender all to this Jesus? How do we balance that? How do we think about that? And as we move in leadership, in midlife, as we're parenting, as we're guiding a family, as we're leading communities, companies, congregations, that same tension point is there. How do I surrender and yet keep going? How do I surrender, relinquish, lay down my claims, my crowns, and yet at the same time, keep walking, guiding, motivating, carrying, shepherding others, and moving forward? How do we find a balance there? Well, it's tough to do, just kind of off the top of our heads. That's why we do a deeper dive. That's why we investigate it. So what does it mean to surrender? What's the essence of this concept embodied in this English word, surrender? What does that look like? What is it? How do I balance it? How do I hold that in one hand and yet be long-suffering and persevering on the other hand? Let's dive into it. We found some cool things. I'm excited to share it with you. So let's move right into our field note on surrender. Surrender. The greatness of a man's power is the measure of his surrender. William Booth. 80 years ago, the Empire of Japan surrendered to the Allied powers, ending World War II and its unimaginable death and suffering. Perhaps 70 to 85 million people around the world lost their lives as a result of the deadliest military conflict in history. The spring and summer of 1945 saw the decimation of Japan's navy, the carpet bombing of Tokyo, and the dropping of atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But the war continued until September 2nd, when representatives of the belligerent nations met on the deck of the USS Missouri to sign the Japanese instrument of surrender. While Japan lost the conflict to the victorious Allies, the state of war ended only with the signing of the document, an agreement setting forth the terms of the unconditional surrender. It incorporated provisions of the Potsdam Declaration, which not only directed the disarming of Japanese military forces and an occupation of Japanese territory, but also contained guarantees that, as the Declaration put it, military members could return home to lead peaceful and productive lives, that the people would not be enslaved as a race or destroyed as a nation, and that the occupying forces would withdraw from Japan when it could no longer rearm for war and participation in world trade relations could peacefully resume. It was those terms and provisions that facilitated Japan's assent to end hostilities prior to a planned invasion of the Japanese home islands, operations that would have resulted in untold military and civilian deaths. Fighting to the death was the preferred approach by many in Japanese leadership, and a rational course of action without guarantees from an adversary. If surrendering means only enslavement, torture, or utter destruction, continuing the fight to the last breath of the last survivor seems reasonable. But when surrender means dropping your weapons, as it were, in exchange for a pathway forward out of destruction and into a peaceful future, it is in essence not losing, as facts on the ground prove that has already occurred, but rather a rightful response to circumstances. The word itself confirms this. Surrender can be defined as ceasing resistance to an enemy or opponent and submitting to their authority, a definition implying weakness, failure, defeat, and other concepts anathema to our ego. But it is also the more neutral act of giving the control or use of something to someone else. When one surrenders possession of an object or its use to its legal owner, such as in the case of a policy or a lease, and this appears to be closer to the essence of the idea. The English term surrender comes to us from the Old French, where it meant to deliver over. This was from the Latin, meaning to give back, return, restore, from re, back, and dare, to give. Surrender, it seems, is not to fail, it is to turn something over to a rightful owner. This became clear to Emperor Hirohito by August of 1945. The Allies had destroyed Japan's combat and defense capabilities, becoming the de facto owner of Japanese forces and territories. It was within the Allies' power and prerogative to allow them to remain or to utterly annihilate them. The choice was to sign and unconditionally deliver over its authority and assets to the victorious nations, or, quote, face prompt and utter destruction, end quote, as the Potsdam Declaration put it. Because of the terms and protections offered in exchange for that delivering over, within 5 decades of its post-war poverty and rubble, Japan became the world's second largest economy and one of the most stable democracies on the planet. A political and economic resurrection from death to life, unique in world history. It is, perhaps, a geopolitical illustration of the surrender that is central to our sonship journey. We're theologically familiar with the truth that we were once enemies of God, separated from Him by sin and death, far off, but now brought near by the blood of the Son, who cultivates peace where there was once a wall of hostility. We acknowledge that this grace has saved us and that it is a gift. But that is not yet the move from servanthood to sonship. It is not the fullness of surrender of a man beginning to identify as a son and heir. For just as the younger son in the rubble of the far country saw himself as worthy only of being a servant and hired hand, the father provided a plan and a future as part of the surrender agreement. A robe to cover the shame of nakedness, a ring to restore authority and standing, and sandals to provide freedom and agency. He only had to receive them. The elder son was bound to the fields in a state of conflict with the father's mercy and his brother's profligacy, working hard apart from the father to prove he could strive and earn the fatted calf, and individually right the wrong of the household's dishonor. His posture as a servant and worker on the estate became his identity, leading only to weariness, then anger, until the father offered him similarly tender terms of surrender to remember his true identity and inheritance by resting. It is into these terms of surrender, of delivering over to the Father things that are rightly his in exchange for the better promises of sonship, that we are invited every day. To give him the cares and anxieties of managing the estate, resting in the reality that it is his battle to fight. To relinquish the arms race of proving our worth and earning our identity, and receive from him the assurance and celebration that we are beloved sons. To return to him our very mind, heart, and strength, which he formed in the womb, which he breathed life into at the first, and which he will redeem and raise up today and at the last day as his own possession, vessels prepared to hold the treasure of his very presence and image. That is the surrender sons are being invited to agree to. It's a surrender modeled by the first son, and a surrender the Spirit is moving sons toward, a surrender that all creation is crying out for. It's a surrender that represents not a defeat, but a new beginning, maybe even a celebration, if only we will agree to it. But if you refuse to surrender, this is the vision which the Lord has shown to me. Jeremiah 38:21. There's our field note on surrender. Hope you're already taking away some things just upon that first reading of the field note. I know as I look back on it, things are really jumping out. It's a fun one to write, not only because I like diving into history and finding places where we can understand something that has happened and draw a deeper appreciation for what a concept is, but also leads right into a deep dive at the end into Luke 15, which we love. It's where we anchor things because it is one of the most powerful passages on this truth that the Father's inviting his sons back to the table. So we looked at this field note. The first thing that jumped out at me as we kind of framed it up with the Japanese surrender in World War II is the fact that a surrender requires an agreement. It's not actually the process of losing or of loss on a battlefield or in life or over the course of a venture. Surrender is that point at which I enter into an agreement. There are contours to it. And that's a huge thing. We saw the same thing in our field note on peace, that peace literally is an agreement from the Latin pact, where the English word pact, pax in Latin, it's a pact, it's a contract, it's an agreement that has terms and conditions, and it creates contours for a relationship and for the actions that are going to be taken within that relationship. And we see the same thing here with surrender, that conflict ends, the state of war ends, the turmoil ends, whether among nations or among people and individuals or in our own heart and mind, when we come to a place of agreement. We say, I need X, I will give you Y. And that's what we see happening here. It's what we saw in 1945, and then we saw it in the process itself, that to surrender is to enter into an agreement. Of course, that's a dangerous thing because it is on the heels of a sense of defeat. In our lives, if we come to a place of surrender, whether it is control, whether it is surrendering the right to dictate our own path, our own pathways, our own methodologies, whether because of exhaustion or crisis or calamity, we come to that point and we truly say, I surrender all. What we're doing is laying something down and saying, I want something in return for that. I give this, you give me that. And to some degree, it kind of chafes because it's like, well, isn't that bartering? But that's at the essence of relationships. And we see it throughout Scripture. God bartering with his people bartering with him, being in relationship where we say this for that. That's what our wedding vows are. It's this for that. It's an agreement. It has contours. It has things that create the space where there can be freedom, intimacy, peace, growth. It's like a walled garden where here it's curated, all towards things flourishing. And so that's what an agreement is. I'm thinking like a lawyer to some degree, but really what we're seeing here is this is just part of human relationships, is creating good agreements. And again, we looked at that on our field note on peace. But, I have some friends who, they like to just roll with it, and they're like, my business partner is my friend, we'll just play a game of horse if we have conflict, we'll just figure it out, shoot some pool, whatever. Well, seen that go really bad. Why? Because there's no contours to it. There's no ability to build trust. Good agreements build trust. And over time, the trust strengthens. I mean, right there in the historical example, we saw that. You had two parties. Let's just take the Allied powers and the Axis powers, but let's take the U.S. and Japan at war with each other. Decimated, suffering, attacks across the Pacific, massive human suffering and loss of life and hostility, and understandably so. And yet, decades later, just a few short decades, they're allies. Just a few short decades later, because of the agreements and the terms of that surrender agreement, and because they were not only agreed upon, but they were acted out, they were executed, you had an alliance formed, and you had flourishing, and you had growth, and you had reconciliation at the geopolitical level. And the same thing in our relationships. We see that. So when we come to the Father and we say, I'm at my end, or I'm at the end of this, I relinquish it, I lay it down, I give it, I turn it back over to you. What does he say? Put a new robe on you, new ring, new sandals. I'll give you the peace that you so desire. I will take this because it's my battle. That goes into the second point for me, which is, of course, the word, that's what the word, its etymological history actually means, is that it is a giving back or a turning over. And so much of our strife, the striving we're trying to do, it's the original sin, of course. Taking from the one tree, breaching the relationship, to take that one thing we couldn't have so that I can have it. I want that knowledge because I see that it's good to give me wisdom. It's just too tempting. I want that. It's the one thing I can't have. I want it. I want to take it. I want it for myself. And what is the whole process of salvation in this relationship between creator and created, between God and his people, is him saying, I'm going to enter into a new covenant with you. A new covenant of peace, surrender, and all this is yours. All the fruits of my spirit, once again, will be redeemed, resurrected, brought to bear. You will taste again of the fruits. How does the story end in New Jerusalem? With tree of life and leaves that are for the healing of the nations, right there alongside that river. But that's what to surrender is. It's to give back to the one who is the rightful owner or the new owner. And that's what we come to as a son, is a point of saying, I'm giving this back to you, Father. I've been holding on to it myself. Why? We do it for all kinds of reasons. Pride, to prove our worth, to strive and earn, because earning feels real good. Look what I did. Look what I did over here with my stuff, my talents, my time, my treasure. Uh, and it's not a bad thing, but it keeps us in the identity of a servant, of a hired hand, of an employee of God, not a son, not an heir, not the beloved, who is given all things when we surrender. So when we turn these things back over to the Father, the things that are rightfully His, salvation, my life, the outcome of this situation, truth. When I break the power of secrets in my life and stop holding on to them as my own and say, these are yours. You see all things will be brought into the light. I give this to you. Then He comes and has a new agreement for us, better promises. And that flowed into the third thing, of course, which was looking at Luke 15 and those two sons that the father went out to, reminding them that they were not servants and hired hands, workers of the estate, earning their keep. They were sons and heirs. To the younger, didn't even respond to the claim of unworthiness. Just said, here's a robe to cover up your nakedness. Here's a ring. It shows you are my son. It gives you authority. I'm giving it back to you. I'm surrendering this to you as you come back to the table, come back to my house. And then the sandals that represent freedom, that he wasn't a servant, enslaved, a hired hand who would usually be barefoot in that era, and also agency that you can go. You can go. You can come and go from this table. All you have to do is receive him. The elder son, of course, holding it all together, doing what's right, but still bound out in the fields, striving. We see, because of the anger that comes out, the conflict internally with those external factors like the father's mercy and the brother's profligate behavior, the dishonor that brought, the loss, the grief, the sense of having to strive, work, grind even harder to keep it all together because of others' waywardness. And it led to weariness, and it led to anger. And it said, look, I did X. I've been working hard. I've been doing everything you asked. I should get Y. Why am I not getting that fatted calf? I didn't even get a goat. Where's my bonus? Where's mine? And in the end, the father just says, come in and rest. And in that resting, celebrate, because you're my son, and all that I have is yours. Everything I have is yours. And we see in those two brothers places that most of us have been. Holding on to something, holding on to the hurts of the past, holding on to the shame, holding on to holding it all together and white knuckling it. And out of that comes weariness and exhaustion. I know it. I have felt it. I might even be feeling it right now in this season. And that's why things like this are not just the invitation to come and rest and receive. They're the reminder to come rest and receive. And we've discovered that those are the three pillars, the three outcomes of living like a son, the three things that we put into practice, not striving, not earning, not proving, resting, receiving, and then remembering. So we can rest and receive again, and resting and receiving again, so we remember. It's the act of continually coming back to the table. And that's how we start leading like a father, going out and reminding the ones around us that they are sons, they are daughters, they are heirs. You can rest. Instead of driving people harder with our own frenetic activity and switching course and being unstable and striving and proving and forcing everyone to adjust to us and controlling the environment, resting and receiving so that others can rest and receive. And out of that, flourish and produce fruit and grow even more. Those are the better promises of sonship. That's the freedom of living like a son and heir. That's what the Spirit is moving in us and through us to proclaim, that we can say, Abba, that He is Father, that He's putting a robe on us, a ring, sandals. He has that for us. And that all the creation around us, all the people, even the world, the systems, crying out for us to be revealed as sons of God who can come and rest, come and receive, remember who we are, and out of that, invite and invest and even inspire others as we lay down, as we relinquish, as we surrender, as we give back to the Father the things that are rightfully His. Mind cannot conceive. We cannot ask or imagine the things that will be given back to us when we do that. Friends, hope you enjoyed our Field Note episode on surrender. Make sure you come back for the next one. It's going to be a great conversation between Sherman Bradley and Jackie Jackson, two incredible CP brothers. You're going to love that. Make sure you come back, subscribe, so you catch that when it drops. Check out the show notes for links, as well as a PDF with discussion questions if you'd like to use this episode for personal reflection or in small group meetings. Keep coming back, subscribe, so you don't miss anything as we continue on this podcast to develop a language of sonship through the CP pod. Thanks to the team at Maroon Harpoon for producing this episode, and to our donors who make this venture possible. And as always, thank you for being part of the Canyon Pathways community as we together live like sons and lead like fathers.